Hello, everybody. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict and personality clashes. And today we are going to be talking about clean communication. So it is 5 must-haves to prevent miscommunication before it starts. So last week I did a Become a Confident Communicator challenge, and this is like a little micro version of that I've pulled out for those of you who couldn't come to the challenge. And this day is all about how do we use our words to make communication effective. And communication isn't just this like pizza delivery, like show up, here it is, and I said it, and don't you get it? That's not how communication works. Communication is about creating shared meaning, and it's incredibly important in our relationships, in our business, in our leadership. All of it revolves around communicating to each other. So good morning, Melissa. So glad to see your shining face. If you are here live, I'd love to know if you're here live. If you're catching the replay, let me know in the comments that you're catching the replay. Always ask your questions. I would love to answer your questions. And so back to the idea of communication. When we're talking about communication, it's really important to know the value of it. So when we don't have something is usually when we figure out the value. And we spend about 2.82 hours a week in solving miscommunication and conflict. Like we kind of squander that amount of time managing unresolved conflict. And when we're doing in that amount of time is we are gossiping to other people, we're rewording the email just so it doesn't enrage the beast. We are losing creative energy because we have this thing in the back of our mind that we haven't dealt with. All of that can be resolved by having clear communication. So clean is a 5-step just framework that I've created to help us remember, am I keeping my communication as clear as possible? So the first step to clean communication is clear. When we're talking about clear communication, we want to paint a picture of the big idea. So I am working on a project for a consulting client, and there's all these different components to it, and I don't have all of the information. So I'm sitting at my desk working on this PowerPoint, and I'm like, I don't have that image. I don't know where to find it. So I need to go find help from other people. And so one of the things that I've tried to do as I've asked for this help is explain what the project is. I'm working on this presentation for this CEO. I am looking for this type of image to communicate this message. That lets them know it's just this big idea, rather than just saying, hey, I need a picture of a chicken. What for what? Like, that isn't very clear. Although it seems clear, I need a picture of a chicken. It's not actually as clear as it could be when I give the framework of what the presentation is for and what even this particular image is meant to communicate. That is clear. And Brene Brown says clear is kind. And I'm a firm believer in that. When we keep our communication clear, everybody is working together to create that shared meaning. So when we talk about clear, we're talking about painting the full picture, painting the big idea, and giving our communication context. That's clear. And then number 2 is listening with curiosity. So communication isn't, as I said, pizza delivery. You're not just showing up and saying, hey, here is what I have to say. We also are interpreting and listening to what the other people interpret and what the other people have to say. That's really, really important. So when we're listening with curiosity, we're not listening and waiting for our turn to talk. We're not listening to see if they got what I said. We're listening with curiosity about, I wonder how they've interpreted this. Is this communication as clear as I thought it was? What are they thinking? What is behind their thoughts and ideas? That is listening with curiosity. Curiosity will always put us in a posture that creates creativity, that creates problem solving, that creates connection. All of those things happen when we start listening with curiosity. So first step is we're going to keep it clear by painting the big picture. Second step is we're going to listen with curiosity. And number three is a really big one. So I want to talk about it for a little bit. It's emotional regulation. So if you just checked out like, oh, big words, I don't know, come back to me, because emotional regulation is what keeps us in control of our emotions. Emotions are fine. Emotions are not bad, but we interpret them as uncomfortable or out of control, or emotional decision making is like a bad thing. Well, here's the thing about emotions. Emotions are part of the human experience. They are absolutely part of who we are, and they're required for real relationships. They're required for making good decisions because, controversial statement, all decisions are emotional decisions. We have to learn how to regulate those emotions. So rather than that tsunami coming at you, or really you feel like your cheeks get all heated and your heart starts racing, all of that, and you're like, and your emotions just feel like they're just out of your grasp. Like, I'm going to lose control at any moment. So I'd love to know if you're in the comments, if you've ever had that experience where you just feel a little bit out of control of what your emotions are happening. So that tsunami that comes for you. And what we want to do is be in charge of our emotions. So we still experience them, we still use them, but rather than this like tsunami that comes at the beach, our emotions are created into a channel where like a canal in Venice. So imagine that canal, that it's going in a direction where we want it to go. And that is emotional regulation. And the reason emotional regulation is so important in clear communication is that when your emotions take over, your communication immediately becomes less clean. It immediately becomes less clear because you're processing your emotions out loud in front of everybody else. And it becomes really challenging to know what's the message I'm trying to communicate. And it clouds the message rather than enhancing the message or making the message more clear. That when we have emotional regulation and we practice emotional regulation, it's a practice, it's an activity. We then make our communication clearer because the emotions are going in the canal. They're going in the channel that we want them to go in. And this comes up the most in hard conversations. And hard conversations are ones where our emotions get heightened, or sometimes we try to like put our emotions over here in a box and we're just going to have this conversation without emotions. But what happens is that the emotions over here kind of like that monster that's in the box that makes the box move, and they're distracting rather than being on the table and part of clear communication. And they show up in those hard conversations where you're not sure if you're allowed to speak up in a meeting, when you have to give challenging feedback, when your boss is giving you challenging feedback, when you need to ask for a raise, when you want to share that your workload is too much and you need to renegotiate that. All kinds of things happen when we have those hard conversations. And that's why I have this course called How to Have Hard Conversations. And in the course, I teach you how to walk through those conversations. Okay, great question. Melissa has just led me into my next point about how do we practice moving from the tsunami at the beach to the canal. And it's a 3-step practice. It doesn't solve all of the problems, but it absolutely helps you get there. And it's called name, rate, find. So the first step in emotional regulation is naming your emotion. So that means I am angry, frustrated, distraught, annoyed, hopeless, confused, whatever emotion that you are feeling, give it a name. When you name it, it suddenly becomes less powerful. The second thing you do once you've named it is rate it. So when you rate your emotion, you want to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Some people like a red, yellow, green stoplight. Some people want to go through like the ultraviolet to ultra red. They like the colors of that. But whatever it is, you want to rate the intensity. I personally just like a 0 to 10 scale. It just helps me get a little clearer. And so am I confused at a level 9? Am I confused at a level 2? And so am I angry? Am I frustrated? Am I livid? Like, am I going to tear somebody's head off? Or am I just like, whatever, I'm annoyed. So give it a rating. So you name it, then you rate it. Then this is the part that really helps us get in control. And it's one that we often forget. And that is find it in your body. And finding it in your body means, where am I actually feeling the emotion? Emotions are actually physical experiences that happen to our neural pathways. And where am I feeling it in my body? So whenever I am driving and I hear sirens behind me, I immediately feel nervous, like I've done something wrong. Even if I haven't, it's just an old thing. I don't know what it's about, but I feel it right underneath my rib cage. So right underneath here, I am feeling this nervous kind of like feeling when I hear sirens behind me. And so that's what I mean by finding it in your body. I had a client one time that she realized when she got nervous about walking into a hard conversation, her head got itchy. Like, that's where she felt it. But when we name it, rate it, and find it, we are suddenly now in charge, because we're the ones giving it meaning and context rather than our emotions controlling us. Now, it takes a second, really about 8 to 10 seconds. It doesn't take that long, but just enough time for you to get in control in the middle of that. If your emotions are super intense, like you're at that red stoplight, or you're at the ultra red, or you're at that 8, 9, 10 stage, you may need to ask for a break and say, hey, I need a moment just to gather my thoughts. Please excuse me, I'll be back in 10 minutes, or can we reconvene in 20 minutes, or whatever. You may need to ask for some time, and that's perfectly appropriate. And I talk more about that in the How to Have a Hard Conversations course. How do you ask for time, and what is professional and appropriate and kind to the other person? So hopefully that answers your question about name, rate, find. That's how we get in charge of our emotional regulation. And then A is absorbing stories. I imagine that you're going to walk away from today's live and probably maybe remember the conversations about finding PowerPoint slides, or you might remember the police behind me and how I felt that. And that's because stories communicate a point better than I'm just going to tell you. For millennia, humans told stories to communicate messages. And it's like in the age of enlightenment, we decided that stories all of a sudden weren't real communication, when in fact, we are all stories. We're made up of stories. Our brain is wired to create stories for context. So in clear communication, give a story as an example. It immediately connects your audience. The people that you are talking to, it could be your team, it could be your kids, could be your spouse, could be your boss, but a story immediately shapes the point and tells them what's happening. It doesn't have to be a long story. It can be 3 sentences long. It just needs to have a clear point of why you're telling the story. You don't even have to put the clear point on the end. You don't even need to wrap it up with a bow sometimes. The story can communicate so much for you. And the final must-have in clear communication is nonverbal alignment. Nonverbal alignment means your body language matches what is happening with your words. So if you are talking to somebody and you're maybe, I'm just going to say you're the listener. Here's what happened to me. I was at the doctor's office. I was at a new doctor. And so I'm up on the table, and the nurse who is taking in my information is at the other table. And she, like I said, it's a new doctor's office, so I haven't experienced this before. She's typing on her computer like this, and she's asking me all kinds of questions. And she's having a conversation with me with the back of my head. Now, she was asking me really deep. I'm in the doctor. She's asking me personal questions. And I'm like, I don't feel like you really care. Like, I don't think you're interested in what's happening. Now, logically, I kind of know that, but I don't feel it. I don't feel that connection. And that will change how your communication is received. It will change how your communication is interpreted. And that nonverbal alignment is disconcerting to people. We will believe body language every time over someone's words. And the idea that actions speak louder than words, your body language is a part of that. So your facial expressions, which, believe me, friends, is a practice at controlling your facial expressions. Those of you who know, you know. So that is part of learning how to communicate clearly. And nonverbal alignment is holding your facial expressions in ways that you want to communicate. Your body, you want to practice eye contact, you want to practice facing the person. In our Western culture, eye contact is really important. And sometimes it gets really intense, and you're like, I'm just staring at this person. And it can feel really intense. So, my little trick when I'm trying to maintain eye contact is to look at the person's right eye. And that helps me maintain eye contact without it feeling quite so intense. So, just a quick review, and then I'm going to answer Melissa's question. If you've got other questions, pop them in the comments. So, clean communication. One, you want it to be clear, give the big picture. Two, listen with curiosity. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Emotional regulation. So be in charge of your emotions, the canal over the tsunami. Then absorbing stories. Stories communicate your point and give context. And N is nonverbal alignment, making sure your body language matches what you want to communicate. So when you ensure nonverbal alignment when you're remote, it's incredibly challenging. However, it's the same idea. If and cameras off in meetings is preference. There's totally fine for that at times. There's lots of research out that sometimes cameras off is fine. But when you have your cameras on, it is important to continue to look at the camera. So I'm going to do a little bit of non-best practices to demonstrate that. If you are and you're like looking like this, and you've seen people like that where their name is at the bottom of the screen and you're like, what are you doing? And you can barely see their eyes, or their camera is in front of them. Their screen is in front of them where everybody else is, like the gallery view is in front of them, but they're looking over here at their camera. That's one of the things that is disconcerting to people. So make sure the camera that you're looking at is the camera that you're using is where you're looking. Make sure that you are still maintaining eye contact. I know often in meetings we're taking notes, and just like you would in a regular meeting, you don't maintain eye contact the entire time. But the same ideas apply. You don't want to have a lot of loud background noise. You want to demonstrate with your camera angles that you are focused on this conversation. So that's a couple little tips. There's lots more to that, but that's the idea of that nonverbal alignment in a remote or video setting. Great question. So when this communication gets a little wobbly, when we're like, I don't totally know, is usually when our emotions are heightened, like we talked about in emotional regulation, but particularly in hard conversations when we are unsure about how the outcome is going to play out, when we are nervous about what we have to say, when it feels uncomfortable. It's a challenge. We have to give hard feedback. We need to ask for what we need. Somebody did something that hurt us, and we need to have a kind confrontation about it. Those types of things are when hard conversations, when clear communication really, really matters. And that 3 hours a week that we waste, if you put that in dollar amount terms, that's $6,500 a year for the average wage. And so if you're making an average, the median wage in the United States, which is about $72,000 a year, it's $6,500 that is wasted in that 3 hours a week of miscommunication and conflict. So the skill of learning how to have these types of hard conversations is incredibly beneficial to you. Not just the emotional things that we talked about, which I think are actually more important, but also your time, your efficiency, your money, your career. All of those things will hinge on you learning how to have hard conversation in ways that everybody comes out um, feeling like connected and clear and on the same page. That's always the goal. And so in how to have hard conversations, there are 4 modules. The first one is communication basics. The second one is preparing you for the hard conversation, which includes your communication style, your conflict style according to your personality, how to really decide what you want, the framework for knowing when it's important to have those hard conversations, and how do you get your mind ready to prepare for that type of conversation. And module 3 is, what do you do in the middle of the actual conversation? What are the words that I say? How do I start this conversation? What do I do in that messy middle when it's a back and forth? And my favorite lesson in the entire course is, how do you close well? How do you wrap it up? That feels like the most awkward thing. You're like, I guess we're done now. And so you can avoid that. How you close well is the secret sauce to how to have hard conversations. And then the last module is, what do you do when somebody comes to you? Because I'm human, friends. I make people angry. People who are currently on this call, I have made angry in the past, and they've had to say things to me. So what do you do when people come to you with a problem? That's the last module in the course. How do you set appropriate boundaries? How do you listen and receive feedback like that? That's the last module. So how to have hard conversations is open right now. You can go to jenwhitmer.com/hard conversation course, or you can do, it's over here. There it is, the little QR code, and it will take you right there. It is only open through March 22nd. So go get all your details. If you've got questions, DM me, ask them in the comments. I would love to answer your questions. Last announcement. We are changing when Thursday Thoughts with Jen is, which also means we have to change the name. I'm going to move this to Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to move our LinkedIn Leadership Lives, maybe that's what I'll call it, to Mondays. I thought about Monday mentors. I don't know. I really love alliteration. Once an elementary school teacher, always an elementary school teacher. So that is just important information for you to make sure that we are moving to Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central. Hopefully my West Coast friends who've been asking me if they can come on as guests or they can watch live, that will help them get on board, and we can have a little lunch together and probably coffee at that time as well. All right. Ooh, Monday musings. Oh, Melissa. I love it. I love it. Monday musings. I have to think about it. So always what we're wanting to do here in this space is give you solid leadership lessons and practical skills you can apply right afterwards, and really interviewing great people who have the same kind of lessons and stories to share with you. So for today, remember your clean communication. I really want you to reclaim some of that 3 hours a week that is lost in miscommunication and conflict. So go get the Hard Conversations course, because I know it will transform your communication when it really matters. If there's not a lot at stake, if we're just talking about who's wiping the kitchen counters, in general, that's not World War III. But how to have hard conversations are when we need the skills the most. And this course will help you. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Ask me questions if you're watching the replay, and I will see you all later. Bye, everybody.